Okay, welcome everybody to the Coach's Chronicle. I am delighted to be here with Dr. Pam Garcy today. Dr. Pam, welcome to the Coach's Chronicle.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan, for allowing me to be one of your guests.
I am really excited to dive in. You've recently written a book called The Present Coach, which I have been thoroughly enjoying, reading slowly and really digesting. And we'll have a chance to talk about that in addition to your storied career.
Thank
You've
you.
built a thriving practice since 1996, as I understand, spanning both therapy and coaching. What first drew you from one world into the other?
Well, when I started off, I was basically only working as a clinical psychologist, which was plenty, but I noticed that sometimes clients would complete their work and want to do something more toward their growth, and I really didn't have a place to send them in terms of my own work with them. So I started to explore the world of coaching and realized that it was a great option to offer my clients. Yeah.
You've trained with an impressive roster of mentors in those years. Who's someone you would say shaped you most, and what did they teach you that still shows up in your work today?
I would definitely say Steve Chandler, as you can see, he's one of the, besides my husband, he's the other person who the book is dedicated to. Yes, he definitely shaped me a lot. When I came to Steve, I was really caught in the world of trying to be impressive, and he quickly helped me with that and really settled me down. He taught me to slow down a lot. And one of the first assignments he gave me was to just take some slow walks outside and do less, and which was really kind of not what I was expecting. I thought he was going to give me more tasks, and that was kind of how I was oriented. But he was all about settling me down and calming me down and getting me focused on service and just focused in general. So that still influences me today.
And in that slowing down, what would you say opened up for you in that time and space?
Being able to understand what was important a little bit more. Really, I think I had lost focus on that. I was really focused on the external goals, reaching goals. That was kind of my thing. And over time, with him asking me, why is that important? What do you want there? What are you really seeking? Really getting to the goal behind the goal. I
Hmm.
started to see, hey, maybe I already have a lot of this stuff that I think I want. Maybe I could actually learn to connect with that and help other people. Really focus more on my helping and my service rather than attaining a goal. Yeah.
Yes. You've been a clinician, trainer, keynote speaker, author, coach. Is there a through line that connects all of those roles for you?
Great question. You have such good questions. All right. So a through line. Hmm. What's coming to me is just the word growth, kind of following the heart wherever the tug is. And sometimes it might be toward teaching, sometimes it's toward learning. It kind of is wherever I'm being pulled and trying to stay steady and listening to that and stay clear with that. So that's probably what's been leading me through all of these different places and spaces. Yeah.
Beautiful. We have a large list of subscribers to the Coaches Chronicle, many of whom are established coaches who have been doing this for a long time and would consider themselves extremely successful, and a large contingent of newer coaches who are trying to become established and start their businesses. And relatability is such a fascinating piece of telling stories in the Coaches Chronicle, something I'm deeply connected to in the witnessing of the individual, the spirit behind the face,
Mm,
so to speak. Was
yeah.
there a most challenging chapter in your career where you questioned everything? And if so, what was it?
Every day. Just kidding. Well, sometimes. Let's see. A most challenging chapter in my career. I mean, it just seems like when I first started, I was questioning like, am I doing the right thing? I was originally training to go to medical school since the age of 7 when my parents bought me a little doctor's kit and started to try to program me what I was going to be when I grew up. And then I changed my mind when I was in college, and they were like, are you sure you want to be a psychologist and not like a medical doctor? And then even when I got my PhD, they were like, do you want to go back to medical school? You know? That was pretty challenging to really honor what was pulling me toward it, and I just felt more connected to having conversations with people and helping them through their challenges and struggles. And, it was a little bit hard to stand up for that with that kind of programming, even though my parents meant so well. But then also, I think just that turning point of really seeing the power of coaching versus psychology. Here I had put all this time, into psychology. And not that I was planning on tossing that or anything, but just starting to see like, wow, there's this whole other world that feels so alive to me. And the first coach that I had wasn't Steve, but was in it. I signed up for this program where there were 6 different coaches coaching me to write my first book. And I would call in every day and I didn't know who I was going to get. But it was just the questions they asked and the presence they demonstrated was so powerful for me. And then I started to realize that I wanted to do some of that work too. So yeah, there's just been a lot of turning points. Also teaching when I taught grad school and seeing myself in others and their insecurity and their struggle and their, fear about, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to ask the right question? Just all of the mental chatter that was going on. And I taught in a way that was different from a lot of the teachers. I would make them kind of do a lot of work in class. Like I would pair them up and have them do different things on each other a lot. And most of the teachers were really into theory and research. And so the kids who I was working with were kind of like, I don't feel ready for this. And um, I remember saying to them a lot, whatever's worth doing well is worth doing badly at first. I forgot who said that quote, but that was a good one, for me to apply to myself too. Yeah. So those are maybe some pivot points for me is just kind of realizing that, what I wanted to do in the world was something that I just needed to keep honoring one step at a time, even if I didn't have the whole picture figured out yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm resonating so much with this notion of programming that you mentioned. And I love that you brought up child, you as a child receiving this doctor set and how the programming can begin quite early. It comes up in my work a lot with the inner child.
Mm.
And you had mentioned the difficulty or the challenge of honoring that. What does that look like for those that are maybe becoming aware or already aware that we get deeply programmed as we're growing up from all the different sources around us, whether it's school or government or parents or religion or you name it, whatever institution. What does coming back to the self look like, and what was that process like for you?
Mm. I think for me, I mean, I can speak about what I observe in others as well. Is it looks difficult at first, and at the same time, it looks a bit exciting and inviting. So that I mean, those are some vague words. So to kind of put it onto my own life as an example, it was a little messy at first. It looked like speaking my truth, knowing that it wasn't going to be well received. And it looked like, taking a step in the direction of my interests taking courses that seemed to be exciting to me rather than dull to me. And it was moving away from what felt sleepy to me to what felt more alive. Uh, yeah. And then it started to look like excitement and it looked like connection with people who were like me,
Mm.
like-minded people. And it was like I was entering the world where I belonged. So there was a question mark there though. I remember when I started going to some of Steve's things, I had a question mark. Do I belong here? And he reassured me. He's like, yes, you do. You belong, you know? So
Mhm.
sometimes it looks like wanting some reassurance that you're in the right place. And sometimes when we return to the self, though, we can find that reassurance inside ourselves in our heart. We can notice, like it's like all the little cells in the body are alive, and they're just like, yes, yes, they're all lit up, you know, moving toward the yes. That's what it feels like.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
Of all the clinical areas you could have focused on, what pulled you toward anxiety in particular?
Yeah. Wow. I feel like this interview is sort of revealing all my neuroses. Um,
Okay,
You're
no
really good.
judgment.
You're really good at interviewing. Yeah. So, well, yeah, I think just that, there's this dance between, for me anyway, between excitement and anxiety, and really that initially, I think my mind often labels it as anxiety, but really in the clinical work that I was doing, I really was drawn to methods that included, first of all, affirming people as whole
Mm.
and complete and, right where they need to be. And second of all, looking at the power of thought and behavior on emotion. And most of the clinical work I did really did that kind of work within the context of people who are experiencing anxiety or depression, or sometimes relationship challenges. And so that's where I ended up moving a lot of my clinical work was in those three directions. But I relate to people who have those things too. So since I felt them myself, but with coaching, it's so much of it lives in the space of conversation and then trying new behaviors. And so it really is a good overlap for that kind of work as well. With anxiety, people often are in the future. Their heads are, their thinking is like, what's going to happen about this, about that, worrying, fear. There's a lot of what if questions, and the what if questions go unanswered. So people are sort of in this space of suspended animation, imagining themselves in this helpless place. And they're not really going forward and really answering their question. And so I found that if I could get them to answer, well, what if? They realized, wait, well, I would just kind of deal with it. I would cope with it, or maybe I would even like it. Maybe it could even be a good thing. Maybe there's something to learn or some place to grow. So yeah, there's just a lot of potential in the spaces that we maybe look at as dark. There's just a lot of potential for growth and light coming in.
Love
Yeah.
that. What's the biggest misconception people have about managing their own anxiety?
Mm, misconception. I think a lot of folks who I work with anyway, think it's permanent and it's definitional. So there's two. One is it's permanent. It's never going to change. I've always been this way. I'm always going to be this way. It defines me is the second piece. This is who I am. And, perhaps it's temporary. Well, maybe it's not permanent. Perhaps it's not the definition of you. Perhaps it's a symptom of something you're believing or something you're not letting yourself address or lean into. And maybe you could actually look at it as an invitation to grow. So, yeah, we don't have to look at it as permanent.
And I'm hearing negative too. rather than an opener.
Yeah, right. That's a great observation. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I think symptoms in most cases, in at least within the clinical world, because it's clinical, it's a disorder. There's something wrong with you. It's the what's wrong with me model, as opposed to, this is just an outcome I'm getting based upon a system of thinking that I'm using,
Hmm.
a way of looking at things.
Yeah. Like a
Yeah.
formula you could reverse engineer to find its
Yes.
inputs.
Right. Like, what am I telling myself what am I believing? Not just what am I telling myself, but what do I really believe? And if I'm really believing it, then I'm going to have certain emotional and behavioral outcomes and physical outcomes
Hmm.
from
Yes.
that.
You have coached CEOs, athletes, musicians, and writers alike. What do high performers tend to have in common when they come to you?
Hmm. That's such a great question, looking at it's another through line question in a way. Yeah. So I think it's just so human to want to feel alive, to want to grow, to want to be able to express our gifts in whatever context we happen to be in, and do well, you know. Um, I think sometimes these things get clouded by life circumstances or pressure, that something we define as pressure, and we kind of forget why we're there in the first place. But yeah, I'm thinking also about, for some reason, what's coming to mind is a couple of different actors who I coached at different points, and wanting to expand their careers, and it's like the pressure that was related to different aspects of that um, could get in the way, slow them
Hmm.
down if nothing else. And, but reconnecting with like the love of doing the craft for them, that was really useful. Like I really love doing this. This is what feels good. This is where I can be of service to other people. And no matter what it is that you do, when you reconnect to that, when you settle yourself and get, drop back into the heart and breathe, really reconnect with why you're doing what you're doing, it helps a lot. It helps to take those steps.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have spent 2 decades being coached by the godfather of coaching, Steve Chandler.
Yes.
Um, what did being coached that long teach you about the work?
Hmm. When you say the work, are you talking about just the general work of growth
I'm
and coaching, or
I'll
Byron
leaving it.
Katie's the work?
Oh no, no, not Byron Cage. I'm leaving it broad as kind of like the work of being coached and
Hmm.
coaching in general.
Yes. Well, one thing is that the work never stops, in a way. There's just always more to talk about. There's always more to learn. There's always something, you know? And sometimes I would feel like, all right, yeah, I'm really settled. I have it all figured out. And then I'd come and I'd share something, and almost instantly Steve would like say like, oh, well, you said blah, 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 whatever it was, and reflect it back with this question that would just open my eyes one step more, It would be like, oh yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Another area for me to grow, yeah, he just was such a deep listener. Really, also the other piece of that is just how important it is to be listened to and held in presence. That is such a settling, wonderful experience, to be coached in a way where the person doesn't come in with an agenda. Their only agenda is to be there for you and to help you to the best of their ability. I mean, I just find that form of coaching to be really, really a gift, you know. So I could go on and on about being coached by Steve. It's
Let's
just
give us one
it
more
was so
nugget.
wonderful. Yeah, one more nugget. Okay.
He's so well known and revered. I mean, not just his books alone, but just industry wide. I think he's someone that people appreciate and look up to, including a number of people who have been interviewed here in the Coaches Chronicle. And so, for
hmm
those readers and listeners who are tuning in that are maybe less familiar with Steve or just want to hear more familiarity about him, I think it's great to lean in, especially with someone who's worked with him so closely as yourself.
I think, yeah, there's so many more. I mean, all right. He's a very humorous person, and the thing that was really a gift, one of the things that was really a gift to me was there was a playful component to the coaching. And it was sort of like, why are you taking yourself so seriously right this moment? I remember one time I was like, I don't remember what the context was, but I remember saying, and I still haven't even made a vision board, and I haven't even made my vision board. And I think I said it a few times, and he was like, Pam, why do you need a vision board? And I was like, wait, what? Don't we all need a vision board? He just had this way of slowing me down and helping me not take everything so darn seriously, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. There was a lot of, for me, there was a lot of um, pausing and going, you know, why do I think I should do it this way? Why do I need this? What's better about that? Why can't I just be here and be the best at what I do? And, why do I have to be somebody else's version of coaching? So, yeah, he was just so wonderful at letting me be myself and bringing me back to that.
I love that inquiry of why can't I just be here, which suggests that we're often racing to do before be. And yeah.
Yeah.
Steve emphasizes presence, integrity, and conscious leadership. How would you say that his influence reshaped your own approach as a therapist and coach?
Hmm. I think that he was so human in his coaching and so true and honest, it felt to me. He was willing to offer examples of times that weren't perfect, to tell me a story here and there about things that, maybe weren't ideal or optimal for him. And it just made me feel like there was hope for me. Like, oh, okay. There was a moment where I was invited to do a TEDx SMU talk. SMU is a university here in Dallas, and I was invited to do this talk, and I practiced and practiced and practiced, and I was ready to go give this talk. And then the day before, I started to scare myself by imagining myself not doing a good job and imagining the audience not liking me and imagining just all the bad things, you know. And I Steve had this thing where you could have this thing called spot coaching, like if you needed coaching on the spot. And I texted him, I'm like, I need spot coaching, which I rarely ask for. And he was like, I'm available. Give me a call. So I called him up and he listened to me kind of go on and freak out. Um, and he said, I want you to watch this little scene. I forgot what movie it was from, maybe Bad News Bears or something. He's like, I want you to watch this little scene, and the kids are all chanting, it just doesn't matter. You know? He's like, and then I want you to sit with that. And maybe you could say that sometimes to yourself, because really it just doesn't matter.
Wow.
And he just brought me back to earth, you know? And then I watched that little scene and I sat there chanting, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, you know? And it was just so liberating. And I just went in there and I did my talk and I got good feedback and it was fun. I got to be present. I got to be present in that moment. And I had a couple of my kids in the audience and some of their friends, and it was just like a nice memory, you know? It was a moment in our family and with some friends. And yeah, that was all it ended up being, you know? But it was like it took somebody listening to me and bringing me back to earth,
And
you
in the
know?
end, it sounds like it did matter, but for different reasons
Yeah,
than you thought it might.
right. Yes.
Beautiful.
I didn't see him as dismissing my, desire to do well. He knew I was going to show up. He
Hmm.
wasn't saying don't even show up, you know. He was just trying to strip away that layer of ego that was, telling me that this meant everything and that all eyes were on me and just all the things the ego does, to rob us of presence and just bring me back to like, I have a message. I'm trying to share some things about the talk was called The Power of a Listening Parent. And yeah, it was not recorded. I did not win the recording, but it was one person got recorded. And you know what? It just didn't matter. It was just right to have that experience and be able to share the message and have a few people in the audience came up and they were like, "Oh, thank you so much. This really helped." And that was all I cared about. That was all I needed.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
That's a beautiful segue because I'm interested in learning a little bit more about what went into your latest book, The Present Coach. And this book, I've been enjoying it immensely, and it centers around the idea of returning to presence. What does that actually look like in a coaching session?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, Jonathan, because that's really, for me, the reason I wrote the book. Because I think, that one of the biggest things we can do as coaches, or even if we're not a coach, but we're just in relationship, if we're a leader and we're leading a team, or we're a teacher or a trainer, whatever it is we're up to, where we're in relationship, one of the most important things we can do is settle ourselves before we go in and really just reconnect, with that, with our being. That I think just brings us into a different space. We're coming in from the heart space. Yes, we have all the intellect and wisdom available, but we're also coming in with the heart open, hopefully, ideally. And that just helps so much in terms of how we connect. So, yeah, when we're in a session, if we're coaches and we're in a session, we might notice ourselves feeling tense in a moment or feeling a different emotion, excited or eager or pushy or angry, even, there are all sorts of human experiences we have because we're human. And if we can recognize those experiences as, okay, this is a human emotion I'm experiencing right now, or I'm wanting to make my client do something, then we can, refrain from actually taking an action in that moment. We can breathe and settle ourselves, notice things that bring us back. So for me, recently, what helps me a lot, I've been noticing, is just paying attention to my client's face, you know, and their voice and their bodies, how they're positioning their bodies, be it whether I'm online or in the office, because I do both of those things. So it's just to really notice and connect with that for a minute just brings me right back to presence, which I think I would prefer if I were the client. That's the other thing is asking myself, what would I prefer if I were the client? Do I want a coach who's present and listening and settled? Yes. Do I want a coach who's using the word should on me? No, thank you. I don't want that. you know. So just little comparisons in my head like that remind me that okay, that's what I want. So that's how I want to go in. When we create that space for ourselves to be conscious leaders, teachers, coaches, whatever it is we do, when we create that space for ourselves, I think it's a powerful communication to our subconscious minds in a way that, we are worth that. And then when we do that for ourselves and we come in that way, just our whole essence is communicating that to our client. They can feel it, whether they're aware or not, I think they feel it.
There's something quite liberating about reading this book that I found was so accessible for so many coaches or practitioners or anybody really, that quite obviously presence is a practice that we can improve upon. But it's not that it's inaccessible to anybody. Anybody can become present. And I think that the way you've written the book and the way how accessible it is in the short little chapters, it's such a great way for people to bring themselves into presence, which I think, as I understand, was intentional in the way you wrote it. But also that it's not some airy-fairy thing that's inaccessible to coaches that need to become certified in this thing called presence. It's available to all of us
Yeah.
just by simply slowing down and being a bit more intentional with the time and the space that is in front of us. And the way that it frees both the coach and the client from having to be anywhere other than here now, which
Yeah,
is
exactly.
so liberating. Um, You ask a striking question in the book. What if presence were the only ingredient a session needed? What led you to that?
Well, I just feel like sometimes that old conditioning, like I need to be impressive, would enter into my brain and it would just clench me up so much. And I need to get from here to here with this client on this session, and just the goal orientation that I was kind of coming to people with, and noticing that that didn't really work as well for me as coming in and just really sitting and listening and being there. So just years of really making mistakes. Thank goodness it's called practice, being in practice, thank goodness, versus being imperfect, because I would not have made it if that were the world that I lived in. But yeah, really starting to notice when I went in and I would say stuff to myself like, be unimpressive, or I would just like say little messages like that to myself, or just be here. Just listen. Don't do anything for the first 20 minutes. Just fully hear what this person is saying. Sit with them, one human to another human. Be here. And just taking off all of the training for a minute, off my shoulders, off my head, and settling myself and then being there. Wow, that worked so much better. Yeah. So it was eventually, if you were a behavioral psychologist, you would say that a new behavior emerged and it was positively reinforced, and then it was repeated, you know, and through repetition, it kept getting positively reinforced. And so it grew stronger and stronger. So that's probably what happened there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Plus
love that.
feedback from clients, Um, I had I've had clients who maybe I saw them at one point and then they came back, and I saw them at another point and then they came back and then I saw them at another point, and getting feedback like, wow, you've really changed. I like how you're doing it now. Things like that. And having that feedback is really pretty cool, to know someone over time and hear that they're noticing a difference. What's incremental for me might be something that they notice a difference in because they've had space between. So yeah, a little bit of that has also helped.
There's a line that I read in the book yesterday that stands out in this moment that you talk about a client who's attuned. And if they're attuned, then you might mention that I'm hungry or thirsty or something that's going on inside of you so they don't
Yeah.
misperceive an answer that you give them as, kind of being short with them or something of that
Yeah.
nature. And what I'm present to in this moment is that the attunement takes place through that intentional pause, that time and that space of being present with them, that you almost kind of orient yourself to that frequency.
Exactly. Yeah, I think as, it's not necessarily any kind of I mean, there are coaches who kind of use techniques, like let's mirror the body posture, let's mirror the breathing, let's do, and you can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's really not about any kind of techniquey thing. It's more about in that settled space, really connecting. It does start to happen where we become attuned with each other. And I think for me, one thing I've noticed is just even in general conversation after the first 5 minutes, for me, I start to really settle into the conversation and I feel calmer and I feel the connection, but yeah, the client can personalize our human state. The client can read an expression on the face where maybe you're smiling or you're thinking and they interpret it. And that is their process. But sometimes it's us as the coach. As coaches, we're, maybe like I didn't sleep well the night before. So I come in and I'm a little more tired, so maybe I yawn and I don't want the client to read that as I think that they're boring because I don't, it may just be I'm just physically not as energized because my sleep didn't go as well as I'd hoped even though I did my part, it doesn't always work out, right? So we're human and we have things happen and we get sick just like others and or whatever, something just is distracting. I will also like I was reading leading a group this weekend and something had happened right before that threw me off center a little and I had brought myself back, but I was still feeling a little distracted. So I said that right up front to the group. I was like, I just want you to know this and this happened. I'm a little distracted. It's not y'all, and I am going to just be right back to presence, and here I am. But if you notice a little something off for the first minute or two, that maybe that my thought goes here or there, and but I know your faces will bring me back,
There's
So.
something so refreshingly honest about that and just being present that it takes it from the role of coach and coachee. Obviously, there are roles involved in this, you know, coaching session, but it really leans into the co-creation of the moment. Like you're two individuals who are playing this game called coaching, where we're getting deeply curious about you. And the honesty
Yeah.
factor of being that level of present, I think, removes the I don't know what the hierarchical kind of thing that we sometimes show up
Yeah.
as. Like I've got answers and I've got important questions for you, and there's something just way more honest about it.
hmm Yeah, I love that word honest too, because that's one of the places I want to live, in my life. And that's where I want to live with my clients is in that honesty.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I think that for me initially, I would orient toward my imperfection as something to be ashamed of. And
Hmm.
I would look at it as something that separated me from others instead of looking at it as something that allowed other people to have permission to be imperfect around me. I could easily model that imperfection. That was something like it was kind of nice to reorient to it and be like, wow, this is something I can always offer. I have an abundance of that,
Yeah.
and then, it's actually helpful for someone and in the practice of presence too. That my mind can be really darty. My mind can go into the future, into the past, or into comparison. Um, into self-critique, into all these different places, that are not here, not in the moment. And so when I started to write this book, and I talked to Steve about it. I was like, I kind of feel unqualified because I, my mind goes all over the place. And he said, well, just write, just write the book you want to read. And maybe there's something qualifying about being imperfect. Maybe it's okay to practice the return. Maybe that's where some of us are going to be. Maybe not everyone is able to live in a state of constant, connection to only awareness with no thoughts intruding and just never attaching to thought, like I'm not there yet in my evolution. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm here to teach who I'm here to teach, or to connect with who I'm here to connect with. So, yeah, I feel like that frees me up when I realize it's okay. Just be where you are right now. And that's good enough.
I'm drawing this parallel between honesty and capital T truth, and the way that truth lands in us as kind of like
Mm,
not needing to be challenged in any kind of way. There's a
yeah.
there's an acceptance quality to that level of honesty and truth that makes it a session or a moment much more forgiving and free than having to put on any kind of performance as a know-it-all professional who has answers or important
Yeah.
questions of any nature. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. That's a great connection, Jonathan. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Jack Canfield says the book is for anyone, not just professionals. Was that broader reach intentional as you began writing the book?
No. But I started to realize that this book was appealing to non-coaches. So I have a couple of communities I'm involved in, and some of the friends started to read the book and they were like, let's study this together. And I was like, wow, people who aren't coaches like this book. What is going on? I'm still curious about it, but I think it's because I think we all can use that reminder to just settle ourselves and get present. All of the things that I say pull coaches out of presence are what pull humans out of presence, and if we want to be present in our relationships, and so many of us are in relationships of one kind or another. I mean, even the parental relationship or the, spousal relationship or friendship or any kind of helper relationship, it's useful to connect with the ideas that I'm presenting, I think. I hope that doesn't sound immodest, but it's more about the ideas than me. There are ideas that have been out there that I'm just kind of, bringing into the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You designed the book as a daily reader with short chapters from real cases. Why that format over a traditional how to be present?
Yes. Well, I think that the book that I wanted to read was a book that I could read as a daily reader, that I could come into my office and open up a page or two, not have a big long chapter, but just something simple that I could read that would make me exhale, just be like, okay, yeah, that's what I want. And so that's the book I was writing, was something where it was not too clinical, not too intimidating, not too technical, just a gentle invitation to return. Yeah. And to me, doing it on the daily is the practice. And so if I have a daily reader, it reminds me to do it. I've had other daily readers and they've had that function, and I can go back over the course of time and look at things I've underlined and see too, like, okay, well, what was important to me a year ago was really important to me a year ago, and that isn't where I'm underlining today. So what I also love about the daily reader concept is you come back to it. You don't have to just like discontinue reading the book when you're at the end. It's just something that can rest on your desk and you can pick it up on a daily basis. And then, a year later, you come back to a chapter and you're like, oh, wow, last year I thought this, and this year I think this, and I can observe my own growth. So I just love the idea of being able to kind of reach out through the pages and be a companion to my fellow people who are trying to help others. And so that's what the intention was. And it was also, I always had the intention the book is going to get into the hands of the people who need to read it or who want to read it. And that was just really the only intention. Yeah.
Kudos to you. I think you've done an exceptional job. And I say that because when when you say to a coach or a practitioner who's about to sit down with a client, remember to be present. I think that most people would think, yeah, check, got it, right? Like that there's this, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Why wouldn't I be present? But there are so many examples throughout this book where I find I have been the coach who wasn't, in that level of presence. And these little reminders, if we're talking about developing a practice, it means practicing. So
Yeah.
there it is, there's these short little clips that can take you inside of moments where we can all place ourselves as the coach and as coachee, where you've shown up thinking about the outcome you want, the goal, right, is this, and then there's a goal behind the goal, or any number of, biological things orbiting around my subconscious mind in this moment or my conscious mind. And the bringing yourself into presence is one of those things that we think we have as a coach. I'm listening at level 3 and I'm doing all the things, and you
Yeah.
you can just be somewhere else. Like my
Yeah.
thoughts have gone over here all of a sudden. And there's just so many great reminders in the way that you've written this that I think, if and you are intentional about saying it too, if you just read one chapter before hopping on a call with a client, you'd be in this reminder state of, oh yeah, that's a different level of presence than I believe myself to be in. And so yeah, kudos for the way that
Thank
you've
you.
shared, yeah, how to be
Thank
present.
you. That means a lot to me that you said that, especially, just the work that you do is so evolved in my
I'm I'll
yeah.
take it a step further. I'm noticing that this interview is more present than I often would. I'd be thinking about like the next question is important. I need to be prepped for that. As you're speaking, I'm prepping my mind for what's coming next. And there are
Mm.
questions coming out in this interview that I didn't write down, that
Oh, that's
I,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
that I'm just really like, oh yeah, no, let's go there. This is where I want to go next. And
Oh,
it's a whole other level of presence, but also intentionality, like that curiosity and level of listening where I can almost abandon the script and go like, well, this is where we're going next. This feels more juicy.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exactly, yeah, exactly where I find, like you said, the word juicy, that's where the juice is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, precisely. And I'm really excited too. I just spent the weekend celebrating my birthday, and so I'm
Oh,
excited
happy
about. Thank
birthday.
you so
That's
much.
wonderful.
I'm excited to start applying what I've learned and been practicing in this book with my next client sessions, because I think there's a whole other layer of possibility that exists in that presence for sure.
I
So
hope you'll let me
everybody,
know what happens in
oh,
your
for sure,
journey at
absolutely,
some point. Let me
yes,
know how that
honored to.
goes.
I would absolutely love to.
Yeah.
Pam, part of your mission is eliminating elective suffering. What do you mean by that phrase?
Hmm. Yeah. Wow, you definitely did your research. Because that was a phrase that I came up with a long time ago. Yeah. This idea that, some of the suffering that we engage in, we're kind of choosing, and yeah, I say that with a little hesitation because I know, a lot of the suffering that humans go through, they don't feel that they're choosing, and a lot of it they're not choosing. So I don't mean to, imply that all suffering is chosen, but there's a layer of suffering that happens when we talk to ourselves and believe certain ideas. And you said the word acceptance a while ago in our conversation, and there's, this aspect of we can live in reality where we accept reality, or we can have this idea of what's supposed to be, and our minds are living here. And then we have this contrast between this utopian idea and reality. And there's struggle that lives with that contrast. And so in that, we get a lot of suffering. It's like, I should be this way. He should be that way. She should be this way. Life should be this way. I'm not supposed to have rotted wood on my house that needs replacing, you know? It shouldn't be. And that's where we start to make ourselves go into emotional suffering. We get a lot of unhealthy negative emotion there. If we can bring ourselves back to this acceptance zone, which is reality, we can still prefer stuff, but we do it without all that agony. We might have some negative emotion, but it's a different quality. It's like, man, that's annoying. Well, I guess I need to fix it. You know? There's a little bit of a call to action with what are called healthy negative emotions that happen when we remove that layer of elective suffering, that layer of shoulding, as Dr. Albert Ellis called it, where we say that everything should be different than it is. You know? Um, but why? Why is that? Is there like a law of the universe that says that it must be different than it is? Unfortunately, there is probably not a law of the universe that says that. And we kind of help ourselves out if we breathe and pause and realize what is. And yeah, we can prefer something different and work toward it. Um, but we can return ourselves to here and now and work with what we have here and now. Take the next right step as opposed to struggling and arguing with what is.
Mm.
Byron Katie, has that famous quote. She says, that um, I don't know exactly how she said it, but something like, I tried to argue with reality and then I realized that reality would win, but only 100% of the time, you know?
Indeed.
Yeah. And it's just so true. It's so true. So yeah, that's what I mean by all that.
Yeah, love that. Presence is hard to hold when a session goes sideways. What keeps you
Mm.
grounded in those moments?
Mm. Yeah. When a session goes sideways, that's pretty cool to think of it like that. Like somehow it's this idea that it's supposed to go this way, not this way or that way or that way or
Mhm.
that way, right? Um, yeah, if I start to notice a change in my own state, I've really, I would say most of the time I notice that and I use it as an invitation most of the time. I'm not perfect either, but it's an invitation to take a breath. And I have noticed that when I just stay with it and do nothing, that there's some sort of natural thing that happens that the client almost brings themselves back if I hold that sacred space, so to speak, and just am the listener and the space holder. Um, Eckhart Tolle says you're either a teacher of presence or a teacher of suffering. And if I start suffering, what am I teaching, right? So I don't need to be in a space of suffering when my client's struggling. I can be the placeholder, um, and just kind of be there with the client and have have a little bit of quietude and stillness and see what that does. And if that isn't working, I can try something else. But very often it's what brings us both to some ideas that work. So I really think that the ideas that come from stillness are better. than the ones that come from me getting nervous. If I'm getting nervous about something, I have to say, what am I attached to? What do I think should be happening here? Maybe that's not what's right for this client. Let's just stay, stay put, you know? Um, it's like down, boy, you know, since I'm in Texas, you
I
know.
just heard that so clearly. Um, there's a section in the foreword from Steve Chandler where he talks about you marrying this sort of more clinical approach to presence, but also the spiritual, the woo-woo side. And I was really excited to get into that part of the book because that's something I resonate with deeply. What what led you to include that side of the approach to presence? And for those listening and curious about what that means, can you give us an example of where spirit or the woo-woo shows up in the work of being present?
The woo-woo. Yeah. Well, yeah, I will say that initially I still had perhaps an egoic need to call it woo-woo, when I would go there. But just, that's what was waking up for me. And I can't expect to write an honest piece if I'm not being honest. So just so many different experiences that I've had that have felt, you know, um, the kinship or the connection that, like you and me and you, that space between us. I mean, what is that? That doesn't have a clinical name for me. That's just essence, it's just the connection. And so in the book, one example might be when I talk a little bit about Abraham Hicks, which to me is like the ultimate woo-woo. And yet, if you listen, and there's a lot of wisdom that comes through, it's just a form of how something is coming through, and it's my mind's need initially was criticize, that's not academic, that's not science, um, you know, and I was closing myself off to something that could be interesting for me, something I could try on, and there were some things in there that helped. So, being open and really realizing that, like, just like if I go into a shoe store and I try on a pair of shoes and I walk around in them, sometimes they fit, sometimes they don't. Sometimes I need to wear a certain kind of shoe because I need a little more support if I'm going to be jogging, for example, and I pronate or whatever. Um, it's not like there's only this one right thing and that's it. The T truth, big T truth, it's all encompassing, and it's like, I got an image as I'm telling you this. It's like that life is like this buffet, right? And you don't have to like eat everything on the buffet, but you take what's going to nourish you in that space, in that moment, whatever it is you need in that moment to nourish you, and leave the rest, you know, and chew on and digest what you've taken and see how it fits for you and let it be there and play with it for a while. So I think also this aspect of playfulness, for me, I've discovered it's really traveling hand in hand with presence too. And it can feel a little woo-woo, but yeah, I have a beach ball in my background, to remind myself, don't take yourself too seriously, Some of life is just showing up and playing.
I love this. It's a theme that's coming up a lot in my work these days. So I'm really on board
Ah,
with this idea of play. Um,
yay.
And you know what? I accepted your invitation, and just before we hopped on for this interview, I actually cracked open the book to read one chapter just to bring myself into presence, and it was the Abraham Hicks chapter. So,
Oh,
yep,
okay.
perfect timing.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
for coaches reading the Coach's Chronicle, what's one shift toward presence they could try in their very next session, besides, of course, picking up the book?
Hmm. A shift towards presence. Yeah, I think for what's coming up for me is just I'm going to take a sip of water, and I think that, like, what are you doing right this minute? If I'm taking a sip of water, I'm noticing the water, I'm noticing the wetness, I'm noticing the temperature. I'm feeling the glass in my hand. I'm noticing the texture of the glass and the temperature of it and the heaviness. And I'm tuning in, So yeah, that kind of goes back to that through line. The subtitle of the first book I wrote was related to tuning in, in terms of tuning in order to come alive. And I think if you do that before you walk to the waiting room and grab your client, or before you click, to let the client into your Zoom or whatever. Take that moment to yourself and realize here you are, you're alive. You get to be here with another human. Is that not the greatest gift? Wow. How lucky are we? We have the best job ever, you know?
I had one final question for you, but before I get to it, what's coming to me in this moment as I become present to what you're saying is that we're we're facing a major shift in the industry right now as the onset of AI is solving problems and answering questions for people long before they've gotten present to where they're at in their internal system,
Mm,
and how important it will be for coaches moving forward
yeah.
to approach the work with that level of presence. It's not about answers and outcomes first. It's about that level of presence and the ability to be with another human at that frequency, at that level of that degree of reverence for how important they are to not only us as we need clients, but how do we show up for them in service of their lives? I don't even know if there's a question here now. I'm just reflecting on how the industry's changing in some ways, but also
Mm,
what's remaining true,
hmm
and what we can carry forward is the degree of presence we have with another, and that human to human interaction is so sacred, truly.
Yeah, definitely. I think you really have your finger on the pulse in so many ways, Jonathan, Yeah, it's something I've been noticing and exploring uh, in my clinical work. Some of the folk that I'm working with right now are in their 20s. I just have, things come in waves, I guess, but they'll come to me and they'll be like, yeah, and so when I talked to chat, it said da 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 da, And initially, when that started happening, I would just bristle, I would have this like reaction, like, how dare you talk to chat? You have moi, you know? Um, it's like
Yeah.
that. And I started to realize that it was two things. It was a tool, that they could use between sessions, and they were still coming to their sessions, right?
Mhm.
And I also realized that it was, something that was not a replacement. It was not a replacement. So it's what it was and what it wasn't. I recently wrote, I have a Psychology Today blog, and it was about, is it time for AI to go ahead and replace your therapist? Um, so I concluded it was not.
Thank you.
Self-serving as that may be.
Of course.
But yeah, there's nothing like, and especially within coaching, within leading, we are still human beings. We want to connect with other human beings. We have that space. And there is an epidemic of loneliness in our culture that, is yearning for fulfillment. It's like, please, I'm lonely. Please see me. Please appreciate me. Those things are human. And one of the things Jack Canfield had, I used to go to a lot of his trainings, and he used to have a slide, and it was of a person with the word appreciate me written across their forehead. And it's just we still want that. We still want to be seen and heard and touched and felt and um, understood, acknowledged. It's that's just so human. And in that space of coaching, we have the opportunity to receive that, to give that. It's so valuable. And I think it's very easy as coaches for us to forget the value of that when we're hearing about, the 20 great suggestions AI gave the client. Well, great. No, I don't have to do that. You can get that there and you can get this here. Yeah.
And you can't get this there.
Great. Great point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, for a new coach listening to this interview or reading it on the Coach's Chronicle, who's entering the industry today, what's a piece of that word advice you might give them as they're beginning this journey?
How can we reframe that word advice is what my brain is saying.
Okay, let's
Um,
do it right now.
yeah,
This is the
yeah.
last question I ask every coach on the Coach's Chronicle, and every time I do it, I almost give myself the little, Jonathan, you shouldn't be asking for any kind of advice, but I play with it because, I
Yeah.
like to break the rules as well.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all right. It's all perfect. Advice can be a good word, right? Yeah, because when I started coaching, I wanted advice and guidance. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a very fair question. Um, ask it one more time.
I'll rephrase it. If you could give one piece of advice to a new coach entering the industry today, what would it be?
Be willing to listen to other coaches, but also be willing to listen to yourself, to your
Mm.
heart. Take some time every day and write something down. Write down a thought you're having, a feeling you're having, an awareness you're having. I left some space in my book so you can write it in the margin if you want. And if you choose to read the book, maybe the book will offer you some invitations as well. But you are so fortunate. I'm speaking to your future coaches here or fellow new coaches. I feel like I'm a new coach every day, by the way, because every day's a new day, right? So yeah, just if you decide to read this book, let each chapter be an invitation to you in that session and make it your practice. So, as I said earlier to you, Jonathan, it's like it's a practice, not a perfect. So, we are learning every single day and growing every single day. And that is part of what makes this journey so precious for ourselves and for our clients is that this is a co-creation, as you said earlier.
Woo! Beautiful.
Thanks.
Dr. Pam Garcy, thank you so much for your time with us today on the Coach's Chronicle. Thank you for your presence.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your service to this great profession we call coaching. And thank you for this beautiful contribution to our industry. It's a really beautiful and special book. I'm going to be reading it often, making it a part of my practice, and probably sharing it among those who I know will benefit from it, which are many.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Woo. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next month on the Coach's Chronicle. Ciao.